COVID-19 has changed everything, from the way we're being forced to live to the damage it's doing to the global economy. But it might just be a dress rehearsal for a much more virulent, lethal pandemic to come. We know this because it's happened before, and we know where it's likely to come from. In 1918, the so-called Spanish flu infected a third of the world's population and killed 50 million people. That's more than all the combined deaths of World War I. It was the deadliest pandemic since the Black Death in the 14th century. Over the next 100 years, new viruses emerged that led to new pandemics, though on a smaller scale than 1918, including a series of more recent outbreaks: avian flu, SARS, swine flu, MERS. Then, in December of 2019, came the novel coronavirus that leads to COVID-19. These viral outbreaks all had something in common. They originated in non-human animals. That gives us an important clue for how to stop the next pandemic, which could be far, far worse than the one we're living through. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has been warning us for years that the next global outbreak will likely come from what's called an influenza A virus. Humans are highly vulnerable to influenza A because these viruses are constantly mutating. That means that viruses present in non-human animals can mutate to become transmissible to humans, and then to spread from person to person. Exactly what happened with the current pandemic. And the world is filled with thousands of veritable incubators for influenza A viruses, modern factory farms. If social distancing is the key to reducing the transmission of viruses, factory farms are the exact opposite. They're spaces that are not only extremely crowded, making transmission inevitable, but crowded by animals of the same species. So if a virus comes along that infects one animal, every individual animal in that confined space is equally susceptible to contracting it. If that virus then mutates to make the leap from animal to human, beginning, most likely, with a farm worker, and then mutates to spread from human to human, we have all the ingredients for the next global pandemic. How deadly could that pandemic be? The novel coronavirus is highly contagious, but from what experts can estimate today, while its mortality rate is high, about 10 times as high as the seasonal flu, it's not nearly as high as the viruses that have caused past pandemics. For instance, while COVID-19 has a likely infection mortality rate of under 1%, the SARS outbreak killed around 10% of those who contracted it. MERS claimed the lives of more than 1 in 3 infected patients, and the avian flu has a mortality rate of 60%. Fortunately, those viruses, while more lethal than novel coronavirus, were far less contagious. For instance, even though avian flu has an extremely high death rate, it is presently transmitted from one human to another only sporadically. But in the future, a virus could emerge that combines the mortality rate of avian flu with the transmission rate of novel coronavirus. That would be categorically catastrophic for humanity. And we can be fairly certain where that virus will come from. The same place nearly every other pandemic has: animal agriculture. In fact, that virus could even be floating around factory farms today. Before it became a human pandemic in 2009, the virus that causes swine flu had been circulating in pig populations for over a decade. In 2007, researchers identified 50 cases of swine flu infecting humans over a period of about 5 decades.
We are closely monitoring the emerging cases of swine flu.
We have 2 new outbreaks of the swine flu to report in
a swine flu pandemic.
2 years later, the swine flu pandemic broke out, infecting nearly 61 million Americans and killing more than 12,000. Likewise, it's practically inevitable that one of the many influenza A viruses spreading among cows or pigs or birds on factory farms around the world right now will make the leap from animal to human, if they haven't already, and then from human to human. The only question is, how deadly will it be? If the next virus is as contagious as coronavirus and as deadly as MERS, it could decimate the global human population. If it's as contagious as novel coronavirus and as deadly as avian flu, it could wipe us off the planet altogether. That's to say nothing of bacteria, the culprit behind the Black Death. Because the conditions on factory farms are so favorable to the spread of bacterial disease, they're flooded with antibiotics. This massive overuse is leading to bacterial adaptations that make these bugs immune to antibiotics. Those bugs can then be passed on to humans by eating meat. So in addition to the risks of the influenza A virus, it's nearly inevitable that factory farms will generate future foodborne bacterial outbreaks on a local, regional, national, or international scale. There's only one way to reliably prevent that from ever happening: by eliminating animal agriculture. Instead, we're directly subsidizing its expansion through government tax breaks and complicated corporate welfare schemes. That's suicidal. In the future, it's likely we'll look back on factory farms with the same regretful acknowledgement with which we today look at the wet markets that spawned SARS and novel coronavirus, as something we could have taken the steps to shut down a long time ago to save millions of human lives and hundreds of billions of non-human animal lives in the present.